Hello everyone, investment scams rampant. Please vigilant and discerning. Do not trust information from unknown sources. Please make sure to recognize 2 official Capital Securities community, Facebook, Capital Securities, YouTube, Capital Wealth Insights.
Hello everyone. Good evening to all our viewers and friends online from Capital Securities. I am Wu Yuan, a securities analyst at Capital Securities Investment Advisory. I'm very happy to be here today to discuss 2 topics with you all. We'll be talking about trend-following trading and contrarian thinking. We're here to seek opportunities and avoid risks, and we'll talk more about this in a bit. First, I'll give everyone a detailed explanation, starting with some general economic data. Then, we'll discuss the recent trends and the overall market movement. In addition, in the second part, we'll focus on the big players and the current investment trading frenzy. We'll identify the key to guaranteed success, yes, in crypto. That's not a mistake, because there really are some new developments in the crypto world that are linked to the stock market. Alright, well, I'm very happy. Good evening to all the viewers. Let me take a look. Ying Mei Dai Zi, hello? Looks like everyone can hear me. And well, I don't know, fate, huh? LS-5, good evening, everyone. Alright, so first, let's take a look at how things are today. Let's start with the market overview, beginning with yesterday's CPI economic data. But regarding the CPI, whether it's the year-over-year figure, up here, this is the core CPI year-over-year, which means it has already excluded energy and food. These are the 2 items with relatively large fluctuations. So, what was the expectation? 3.1, and the actual was also 3.1. In fact, there wasn't much change, and there was no real difference from expectations. Additionally, if we look at the month-over-month figure, the expectation was 0.3, and the actual was also 0.3. So really, there was not much surprise or shock for the market. So, how should we look at things going forward? Actually, if we compare it to before, the day before, I posted the 2-year bond yield. Now, because yesterday's CPI didn't come in unexpectedly high, nor did it, do anything like that. Since it wasn't higher than expected, everyone's worries about runaway inflation didn't come together, so the main theme is still rate cuts. Looking ahead to the end of the year, a 1/4 point cut in September seems pretty much certain, and by year-end, it could be 2 or 3 cuts. Let's take a look at that. But in any case, over the next few months, or even within half a year, we can all predict that interest rates now have a clear direction. This direction hasn't changed for now, so we should go with the trend. Let me repeat the asset classes I mentioned yesterday. First, the stock market. Thank you all once again. The third is real estate, which includes both physical properties and, regardless of whether it's the commercial real estate ETF you hold, or stocks related to residential construction. They will all continue to experience cyclical trends going forward. Alright, next, the 4th category. We mentioned assets related to cryptocurrency, regardless of the form. Aside from tangible assets like gold and silver, we also have assets related to cryptocurrency because the risk profile of these assets is relatively high. As for interest rates, if we know that the current fixed deposit rate is, say, 4.5%, let's just use a relatively high fixed deposit rate as an example. Of course, it's not that high in Taiwan. In Taiwan, it might be around 1.3 to 1.5% for a 1-year fixed deposit rate. If that's the case, and if the fixed deposit rate is high, let's take the United States as an example. If it's 4% or higher, 4%, we might put more funds into something stable for stability. 4% yield is the interest rate. That would be enough for me. But if, say, it drops to 1 or 2%, and I feel like maybe my cash flow needs are higher, or let's say I still hope to earn a bit more on top of that, then I would move my money out of these kinds of fixed returns or fixed deposits. I would transfer my funds out and go buy things like what? Gold, silver, real estate. Real estate also has rental yields. Right. And then, even beyond that, there's cryptocurrency. Now it's pretty common if you look at some cryptocurrencies, whether it's on platforms or apps. Some of them might set it higher, because they're letting you take on some risk, right? What kind of risk comes with tuition fees? I mentioned it yesterday. It could be that this gets. There are risks in terms of cybersecurity, like your wallet being stolen, or the platform itself, if it's not big enough, could face risks like going bankrupt or something similar. These kinds of issues have come up before. So, they have to offer higher returns to compensate for the risk. That's the only way you'd be willing to put your money in there, to keep it there at all. It definitely can't be safer than Tsinghua Post or a big bank like JP Morgan in the US, right? At least that's what most people would generally think. So that's why there's a risk premium, which is basically reflected in the interest rate. But now, as interest rates are set to go down, that means generally if Taiwan follows the US in lowering rates, and both cut rates, some money will flow out. That money might go into buying funds, large cap ETFs, or maybe more aggressively, into semiconductors. Lately, semiconductors have been very popular. Semiconductor ETFs are all fair game. Basically, any AI stocks with growth potential are doing well. So, with interest rates moving this way, that's one thing. It's an obvious trend. Like yesterday, the intraday low even dropped to 3.99 something, so we already saw a 3 at the front, but then it bounced back up. So we're already seeing prices approaching the low point of April. But this trend is more clear. So we see that if this trend doesn't go his way, he just needs to go with the flow, if you already hold the assets we mentioned above. Maybe you can just wait and observe what happens next, because next week, which is September 11th, no matter what, the Fed will announce its interest rate decision at 2 a.m. on the 17th or 18th. Even when the decision comes out, honestly, everyone has already generally expected this outcome. The only thing to worry about is whether it will turn into a buy the rumor, sell the news situation. So, we have to see what the post-meeting statement and wording will be like. But if you're feeling anxious during this period, there are still 2 or 3 more events coming up. For the next few trading days, you might want to observe, or if you already have positions, hold them. If you haven't bought in yet, maybe you're holding more cash or have been cautious. Then pay more attention going forward, since the market has been rising lately. Previously, we looked at the 30-year mortgage rate. Back then, I was looking at 2 years. Now, I'm looking at the bigger picture over 3 years. Actually, starting from 2023, that is, up until September, around August or September, it had already reached the peak of this cycle. After hitting the peak, it started to go down, and the next 4 major drops happened. Each of these phases was trending downward. Now, it's even at 6.54 or lower, because in a bit I'll mention a news story about this. This is the general trend in the near term. Welcome to Dapa Market. And also, good evening to everyone. Welcome to the show. Now, let's take another look at interest rates. Actually, we can't really say there's a direct cause and effect to a correlation here. But if we look at the statistical data, this is from the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank's database, which contains information related to economic data. Database. Actually, anyone can go there and find a lot of related information, no matter what you're looking for. There's a wealth of data on prices, the labor market, and all sorts of economic indicators. But you can see, what is this gray area in the middle? Here, it mentions that the shaded area represents times when the US entered a recession, like in 2020. This happened because of the lockdowns and the pandemic situation. But even in 2021, there was a significant surge, because at that time, things hadn't fully reopened yet. There was even remote work, so people didn't really need to commute or have extra expenses. Some costs went down, or the pandemic wasn't under control. People had just started getting vaccinated, so many were still hesitant to go out. Some of the larger indices or travel hadn't fully recovered yet. Even after things recovered at that time, from 2023 to 2024, starting in 2025, disposable income actually hit a new high. But part of this is related to what? It's connected to the rise in the stock market. So let's take a look at that next. This is the S&P 500, which continued to rise by 0.85% yesterday, hitting another record high. Actually, this is because the wealth in Europe and the US, or rather, their personal wealth allocation concepts differ from those of Asians. In Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, and China, there are differences. Their views on real estate are less strong. Some think having a place to live is enough. They do not mind renting, but if they can buy, that's good too. It does not matter to them. But they consistently, whether it's for retirement or not. When it comes to their funds, like 401ks or stocks, the way they allocate their finances. They always make sure to put some in there. There's always a certain proportion invested in the stock market, whether it's through funds or otherwise. Stocks or funds, it's all the same to them. So their participation rate in the financial markets is actually quite high. For Chinese people, if they're more conservative, they might just think, I'll just save money and buy a house, that's enough. Maybe they've heard too much about the stock market, whether it's day trading or short-term trading. They've probably heard too many stories about losses like that, so it scares them and makes them afraid. They feel it's hard-earned money they've made. The right way to manage finances is still to set aside an emergency fund, get insurance, and so on. You can explore different aspects. Now, let's talk about the S&P 500, the main index in the United States. The Dow Jones and Nasdaq are also good references. But here, we're talking more broadly about Americans' wealth, which is also related to the disposable income we discussed on the previous page. Their income just keeps getting higher and higher. Because actually, from this, they can either cash out, sell, or their salaries keep increasing, since they all have a steady income. Whether it's through raises or other means, their income keeps going up. Raises and labor both contribute to this. The market, it's not just about whether there's a sell-off or not. Those are two separate things. What I mean is, in today's labor market, even though things are pretty tight and new job creation isn't high, if you really have the skills, whether it's in technology or just in general, no matter if it's in the service industry or whatever, if you, as an employee, are doing a good job, actually, for American companies, they're willing to keep you on with a higher salary. Whether it's giving you a raise or a promotion, they're willing to keep you. None of that matters. Let's take a look at what we call reverse thinking. If the S&P wink with tongue sticking out has already hit a new high now, the largest weighting in the S&P is actually in tech stocks, which make up a significant portion, about 20-something%. After that, it's probably financials or other sectors. But then you can start thinking about technology. If we're still on board with this today, then we just keep holding on, right? But if you don't have any yet and want to make additional investments today, which sectors can you look at? Maybe some individual stocks or sectors that have been consolidating during this period. Let's take a look at those next. So why is there a related trend as well? The wave is unstoppable. Actually, that's just how Americans are. If they make money and have extra capacity, they balance their income and expenses. Besides balancing, they even have a savings rate. Today I saw a statistic showing that right now, there are still some savings left. A savings rate close to 4 to 5% is actually pretty good for Americans. So it turns out that this concept has already been established since the pandemic. Now let's take a look. According to the latest research, nearly 17 million American households have indicated that they might buy an RV for camping in the future. Why? Because even though Americans have flexible vacation policies or remote work options, their work pressure isn't necessarily less than that in Asian countries. The reason is that they follow a meritocracy. Maybe they have some flexibility when it comes to taking time off or working remotely, but the pressure is still there. But the competition among workers in the workplace is intense. Everyone wants to get promoted and earn a raise. They still work very hard to chase the American dream and strive to move up. So, the pressure from workplace competition and the overall environment isn't any lighter. So when they're on vacation or spending time with their families, they actually hope to get away, whether it's from the city or not, or, in other words, from the kind of environment they've already grown tired of in their daily lives. So they head out into nature. And the United States is really vast, right? We mentioned before that if you don't have a car in the US, it's actually pretty hard to get around. Otherwise, even just going to the supermarket, or if you need to go to a hospital that's farther away, you basically have to drive. Now, this is another kind of lifestyle. We can see that buyers aged 35 to 54 now make up almost half of all car owners. That's 46%, and they also have remote work, or they combine it with other things, like the digital nomad style of work. So this van life trend is coming up next. In other words, living in your vehicle has already become a viable option. And in addition, there's also what we just mentioned about taking vacations. We go outdoors, whether it's hiking or going to different places. For example, national parks or hidden spots that we've never explored before. Now in Taiwan, outdoor activities like hiking are really popular, right? Or even going to, whether it's going to Japan or Korea, maybe for skiing, or I want to explore some things I've never seen before. For example, things like the blue tears phenomenon. This kind of travel style, So actually, it's a passion. More and more people are getting into outdoor activities. And it actually starts with young people. Young people might invite their parents to go along, since their parents might already be retired. But young people might think, should I go with my friends today? Or maybe with my parents? Sounds good. Let's take a look at WGO. This code here in the lower left corner. The company's name is Winnebago. However you say it is fine. I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. Basically, they're a supplier of outdoor equipment. So, what do they have? This boat. Some people might think it's a yacht, but it's actually not a yacht. It's called something like a pontoon boat. Or you could say this floating boat is more like, it's not powered, but it might have some things on it, for example, like a sail or something to help steer, some equipment or devices. On the left, you can see there's a sense of scale. People are about this big. A regular car would be about this size up to here. If it's a sedan, it's about a third of the way up, around here. The extended version is even longer. So, it's about 3 times the length of a typical sedan. The dog is so small, even shorter than this tire. But it's actually a very powerful and fully equipped vehicle. Once you see the interior features, you'll understand. It even has things like a sofa, a 50-inch big TV, plus a kitchen, bathroom, and all sorts of amenities. Of course, there's also a double bed and a bedroom and so on. And you can even, if you're outdoors, if you open this part up, for example, inside, it can even be hidden away. When you're outdoors, you can watch a TV like this. That is, on the side panel, on the outside of this RV, there's a TV wall that can be opened up for viewing. You can set up 2 wooden chairs, or lounge chairs, or a sofa, and then you can just relax there. This way, you can enjoy whatever you like, say sports games, concerts, or all kinds of movies. It's all good. So this is what a mobile outdoor equipment supplier does. Now let's take a look at why, in the past 5 years, its market share hasn't really grown, especially recently. Besides RVs, which we just mentioned, there's also what we talked about earlier. You can do all kinds of activities outdoors. You really can just drive your car out there. You can drive to nearby states and visit any attractions you want. Now, let's talk about their aluminum business. Back in 2021, they acquired a brand called Belletta. In the aluminum business, especially in Fukui State, their market share has climbed year after year. From the start, it gradually rose from nothing to 6, 7, 8, and then 9%. Today, I'll explain the reasons behind this. Well, recently, the company participated in the Husher RV exhibition and launched several new models. So actually, their stock price has recently gone from being pretty stagnant. It has already started to slowly pick up again, so everyone can continue to take advantage of this. At present, its forward P/E ratio is about 14.6 times. So relatively speaking, for an industry like this, that's more practical. Or you could say, in the field of industrial products like this, it's not really high, but it's not low either. It's basically within a reasonable range. So next, we'll see if there are any catalysts that could give it another opportunity. Looking further up, as of now, you can see it's already formed a triple bottom, or even a quadruple bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. If we're just talking about the technical chart pattern, that's basically what it looks like. So let's see how it's going to break out next. You can keep an eye on WG. Now, moving on to another stock, the other farm we mentioned earlier. Right, the RV, the camping RV. So, what is that farm? I think we already mentioned it a few days ago. This is about national defense, right? I'll mention it briefly later. Today, we're not discussing national defense. We're focusing on results. There was a time when public safety and security were also a focus, especially for some companies. What are the new highlights in personal security? Let's look at Saturnail, the manufacturer. We call it Saturnail 1. Its stock ticker symbol in the US market is S. In fact, Touch's major clients are already well-known companies, such as Aston Martin, the British Warriors, Hitachi, Uber, and AT&AMP. You can imagine that these are all telecom companies that require a strong reputation. Big names like Lyft and other platform companies all choose them as a supplier. Why? On their website, in financial reports and presentations, they present a concept. They say, in the past, what were traditional account holders like? We can even call them legacy. No problem, but there are pioneers, right? Information pioneers, like MacBee antivirus software. He thinks these are more old school. So, in terms of people. For example, what drives outstanding engineers or culture? What is it that pushes them forward? In this field of technology, it's antivirus software, old brands like CrosstTry or Microsoft. It even comes with built-in cybersecurity protection, right? He thinks so. This uses the cloud for monitoring, and then he explained his concept and mentioned Purple AI, which also claims to use AI. As we said, its name is Sentinel. Sentinel is meant to be automated, run 24/7, and self-sufficient. This Sentinel mode is not Tesla's, but a Sentinel for security. In other words, it's year-round. Then, it's 24/7, 365 days a year, using technology to detect all kinds of suspicious security vulnerabilities or possible attacks. And of course, whether it's installed on endpoint devices or on cloud platforms, it's present on both. So you could say they've raised the bar a bit. Alright, no problem. Let's take a look at the company's latest quarterly revenue, $242 million, which is slightly higher than market expectations. As for earnings, they're actually a bit weaker than what the market anticipated. But next, they're projecting revenue for the upcoming quarter, the latest fiscal quarter, to reach $256 million. For the full year, that's close to a $1 billion level. Looking at it now, the valuation model we're using is price to revenue. That is to say, compared to before, now the next one is about 6.6 times, right? In other words, for every $6, or $6.60 of share price, you can buy $1 of revenue. But what was the situation before? Previously, at its peak, for example, when we talk about the orange line was at $13.50. You needed that share price to buy $1 of its revenue. Now, it's at a low level. Anything below 7.2 is considered low using this evaluation model. Since the company is still experiencing high growth, that's why we use this kind of model for assessment. So, it's something everyone can keep an eye on. As for what happens next, we'll have to wait and see over time. His latest news is that he has partnered with a European company, the SOAS Group, a subsidiary under them. This company is called SWAT Digits, and they are entering into a strategic partnership. They will be providing AI-based technology solutions for European clients. The key point is that they hope to have control over the data in this area. Data leaks must comply with local European regulations, because Europe is really strict when it comes to consumer protection, information security, and information technology. They actually have a pretty high level of vigilance. They also don't want their clients' privacy, or user privacy, to be leaked. So recently, with this kind of situation, do you ever feel, at least when I was making this presentation, I felt that it's actually very similar to the current model of WGO that we just mentioned. It's been performing well for quite some time now, and when something has been doing well for a while, will the flow of funds eventually rotate into this kind of sector next? Everyone can take some time to really think about this. Now, let's look at the US stock market dynamics and key stocks. As I said at the start, I told everyone directly, interest rates are going down, and so is real estate. The US statement says the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate is even lower than the 6.54% we just mentioned. It's at 6.35%. That's the average rate. They said that this has already been on a downward trend for several consecutive months, so there's still a possibility it could drop further. This trend should continue. It hasn't changed. Recently, Trump has also been pushing plans related to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. But Yannick also said that he actually doesn't want to release too much of the equity. In fact, they hope the government can hold on to a bit more. Alright, next, let's take a look at this. Microsoft is planning to expand its resources for training its own artificial intelligence. Previously, Microsoft and OpenAI actually had a major partnership, because Microsoft actually invested quite a lot of money in OpenAI. But because there were some disputes in the middle, Microsoft. Now, it's actually more like they're moving forward in parallel, doing more on their own. To put it bluntly, whether I use OpenAI or not, I still want to collaborate with other AI companies. For example, they're now working with Anthropic. Now, Anthropic hopes that their organization, they hope to be able to comply with the whole. Whether it's about user safety or truly about AI, their so-called self-regulation, whether it's about safety reviews or not, or even whether they uphold certain values that humans should have. In other words, you wouldn't, for example, tell a user to commit suicide or to commit a crime, or anything like that, or if they mention something relatively negative. It will block things that are harmful to human society. This is the main concept behind Anthropic's content policies. Alright, so as for this, actually, Suleiman is the one in charge of AI business operations, right? He was actually the founder of DeepMind before. Or at least one of the top executives. So actually, Microsoft is working in this area too. They really are a powerhouse, very strong. Because whether it's their funding, or the annual revenue they get from software. Just yesterday we mentioned that, besides Oracle, Microsoft is actually the #1 company in the world in terms of software revenue. Well, when it comes to software, the profit margin is actually very high, so they continuously have a huge cash flow. Whether it's through subscriptions or using their Office software and various other programs, as long as you use a Microsoft account, all of that brings them related revenue. Alright, let's take another look at the international situation. Here, it's mentioned that actually, Trump made a statement about this, which we've been talking about all along. Poland's airspace was invaded by a Russian drone. Of course, regarding this incident, he said he doesn't want Russia to do this. He said he even tried to help ease the situation a bit. He said it might have been a mistake, but even if it was a mistake, he still doesn't like it. He doesn't like Russia. Getting close to this red line. What is this red line? It's the border of NATO, the border of NATO member countries. He doesn't like it, although I don't really know how much he actually thinks that way. Because maybe when it comes to strongmen like Putin, or Xi Jinping, or Kim Jong-un of North Korea, maybe he has a certain feeling about these strongmen. Maybe it's because he himself is actually a strongman too. Look, his right ear was shot. After that, he was also all about fight. That kind of heroism. That kind of image is actually very striking. Of course, but he's in a democratic and free country. When it comes to interacting and communicating with strongmen, he really goes all out. Like before, he even went to North Korea, right? He crossed the 38th parallel, and then the two sides shook hands and hugged. But this term, it hasn't happened yet. As for his attitude toward Putin, has there been any easy change? I think that's something we need to question. He has to say it this way, because after all, he's from the biggest military power in NATO, right? The other European countries, Germany, France, all of them, have to look to him. The UK, Italy, they all have to look to him too. As for Trump, okay, let's keep watching. This chart here might be a major key to what happens next. Why did he say that? The reason Poland's airspace was violated was because of Russian drones. They flew over from Belarus. So why do they have to fly over from within Belarus? Why? Because actually these two, Belarus and Russia, are very close allies. By flying over from here, they can then say, the UFO is just a cover for an operational error or something about the flight path. But actually, they're testing NATO's limits. They're testing their counterattack capabilities, even saying that sensors were installed on board. They've already started transmitting some entire data back one after another. Or maybe the real terrain of this border. Who knows? Maybe they've already figured it out long ago. They've probably already analyzed it and sent the data back. So next, we still need to pay attention to this. That is, the Baltic states and the Suwalki corridor in between. Will Russia or Belarus try to interfere or harass them next? Everyone needs to be cautious about this, and Northern Europe has always been on guard against them, and is gradually stepping up. Increasing military support, especially for the Baltic region. From what I've seen, both France and the UK are continuing to strengthen their efforts. For Poland, this kind of assistance with air defense is very helpful. So, as mentioned a couple of days ago, Elurix brought up the Poland Defense ETF. We won't talk about that today, so let's move on. Next, let's look at today's second topic. Crypto platforms and exchanges are going public one after another. Here, there's the founder. The founder or staff member of DFNS, which is a crypto wallet technology company. Good evening to the online viewers, and good evening to Jeff. So, he mentioned here that, actually, he quoted Goldman Sachs, saying that this summer is stable. Under the stablecoin sector, of course, there was Circle's IPO before, right? And in addition to that, the US Treasury and Trump signed a regulatory milestone bill for dollar-pegged tokens in July. A milestone bill for tokens. Anyway, what I'm saying is that right now, this industry is extremely hot, and everyone is fighting for talent. They use high salaries or even better benefits to attract people. But even then, it's not guaranteed you'll get the best talent. What he's talking about now is this, and as for yesterday, it was about FIG. This technology is listed with the ticker symbol FIGR. Yesterday, the opening price immediately jumped to $36. That's actually pretty high, right around here. After briefly spiking to 36, it quickly dropped back down, which honestly isn't all that unusual. It really is like those IPOs that open high and then fall back. The main point that follows is also about this. The original IPO price was $25, so it opened about 40% higher than the IPO, which is why it later dropped back down. You can check out the chart of yesterday's price movement at 31, so actually, there was selling pressure throughout the session. Oh, it kept getting sold off. So, what does this company actually do? It was actually founded by the former CEO of SoFi, Tenor Knight. He started it. He also founded it back in 77-78, and its main application is the core business is to use blockchain technology to promote this. So, for ordinary people, if their house has a high value like this, that is to say, maybe they've already paid off half of their mortgage, or maybe they've paid off 70% of it. In that case, they can actually use it to take out a loan. They can do something like a subprime mortgage or a second mortgage, right? If they want to make better use of this money, or activate this asset. But with traditional methods, if you want to get a loan from a financial institution, you have to apply for it. It's actually not that easy, because they have to assess the person's. Whether it's their repayment ability, their income, their job, the location of the house, and so on. And if they want to cash out, there are penalties. How much residual value would there be? The process takes a really long time. So, they're using this kind of blockchain technology to solve these issues. That's why consumers really like it. Here, we can see that 100% of the applications are done online. And then, looking further, there are about 200,000 or more of these. Homeowners like this. Or you could say properties. However you want to think about it, it's all fine. And actually, the total amount on the platform has already reached 17 billion. That's what it is. This platform is used for operations or lending, so that's what we're talking about. He said this is the first one. That is to say, it's ranked number 1 in the entire United States. It's not related to banks. It's not a traditional bank or a credit institution that issues loans based on credit. Actually, it's also received some pretty good public reviews. Alright, let's take a look at what's next. So tonight there will be the Gemini Exchange will be doing an IPO, going public. Oh, as for them, in the past they've actually attracted quite a few big names. So our second topic today is about investments from these big players and the hype surrounding it. Let's take a look at how to integrate this kind of approach. An investment method that combines the stock market and cryptocurrencies like this. Alright, let's take a look at which ones they've attracted. Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Morgan Creed, tech leaders like New Flow. Anyway, at that time, their valuation had already exceeded $1 billion US. That's what we usually call being part of the unicorn club. They had already surpassed that long ago. Later, in 2021, as the internet boom grew, along with AI and cryptocurrency trends, their valuation surged to $7 billion US, nearly 200 billion new Taiwan dollars. That's quite high. So today we're talking about this IPO, right? A bit later, probably after the market opens around 9 o'clock, there should be new updates. This co-founder, this Win Levels guy, he sold about 30% of his shares. You see, through platforms like the ones we mentioned before, just added to the S and AMP wink with tongue sticking out, like Hood, Robinhood, Moomoo, Futu, and Weibo, these kinds of online platforms. The economy under him is basically online. Brokerages mainly allocate their business projects to retail investors. Actually, let's first look at this popular IPO below. Looking back at recent years, for example, Circle, the leading platform for stablecoins. So when he saw this IPO, the price is at the red dot or the magenta dot, the rainbow color. Here, this point is $20, $40, $60, $80. Looking at it this way, what about the opening price? If we look at the IPO opening price on the day, you can see there's a huge difference. At that time, it was a low base IPO price. All were low, and when the market opened, the price jumped. After the price surged at the open, it closed here. On the first day, we're only looking at the first day. Right now it's also the first day, right? Gemini's first day, okay, but that's not the case for bullish. We'll talk about bullish in a bit as well. It opened here, but ended up closing lower. So today, Gemini actually mentioned this approach of theirs. Would you call this inclusive finance? Maybe, since they're releasing shares to everyone. But on the other hand, what's the deeper intention here? The people who would buy their stock are already believers in cryptocurrency, and they probably already allocate at least part of their assets or funds to it. Maybe they also have investments in the stock market or real estate, in addition to the crypto market. But he would probably allocate it anyway, because he already knows a crypto platform like this is about to go public. And he already keeps up with news in the crypto world, so giving him this kind of stock. So what does this actually mean for the first type of user? He'll keep trading on Gemini. The second type might only have this stock. He won't sell it right away. So whether he's a shareholder or a user, he actually has a certain level of stickiness that makes him more engaged. This increases the user's reliance on the platform, and it can even attract related discussions. Whether it's an influencer or just someone who's already very active, or an active investor, it doesn't matter. Last time, it was this bullish attitude. Now, bullish is actually a great word to describe our stock market. Bullish refers to a long-term bull market. On Wall Street, there's a huge bull statue. The bull pushes upward, symbolizing the market going up. Recently, it's also been paired with the phrase hitting new highs. We can see that on that very day. It was the IPO we just mentioned. As soon as it went public, the opening price was this, right? What was the highest price during the session? 120. The opening was around 90, right? It shot straight up to 120, didn't it? But in the following trading days, it gradually slid down to around 50. It only stopped falling there, and now it's roughly around 54, 53.99. So, as we look back, since this stock and Gemini, which is also listed today, both have some similarities, as they're both on the exchange. So today we're facing a dilemma. What kind of dilemma? Should we rush in and buy as soon as the market opens, hoping for a rally like before? Or is there a chance we might fall into a trap? What kind of trap? Well, after the previous stock opened, the trading days that followed weren't that great. Except for the next day, which was still okay. The stock went up again after the close. So if you sold the next day, you could still make a profit. Maybe you could still sell. So, are we more afraid of missing out on gains, this fear of missing out, that FOMO emotion? Or are we more worried about falling into a trap? If we buy here and then it drops to this point, what should we do? Everyone has their own risk and opportunity preferences. People have different approaches, so their strategies are different too. Some people might be used to swing trading, and if that's the case, then of course you need to be careful. Is he setting a trap? If you're only holding for a day or two, then it's really 50-50. It's hard to say what's best. But you probably need to have some risk management in place. Why? Because during the IP2 phase, everyone liked to rush in and grab whatever they could. Yes, the market's enthusiasm is heading toward extreme optimism. Really extreme optimism. After that, we'll see who ends up being the last mouse, who gets stuck at the end, and that's probably when they'll start selling. That's when people start selling over here. So, there are risks involved here. Maybe you can wait, or maybe, as we look ahead, actually during today's session, we don't necessarily have to watch Gemini. Besides Gemini, we can look at BLSH, or we can check if Circle will do anything, because this trend gives its stock price a chance to go up even more during the session. So maybe, who knows, which stock should we actually get into? Smart folks like you can think about that yourselves. This company's name is really benefiting from the AI boom. Jeff just mentioned that this is related. Right, because Gemini is indeed under Google. This AI is something everyone uses in their daily lives. It's almost second only to, well, you know what. Among many large AI models, it's just behind GPT. Next, let's look at the consumer confidence data to be released today, and also inflation expectations. Inflation has short, medium, and long-term aspects. That is to say, consumer confidence for 1 year and about 5 to 10 years out is actually very important, because the US is mainly a service-based economy, and people there have really strong spending power. If consumer confidence is strong, then things will just keep going up from here. But if it turns weak or starts to decline, then everyone needs to be careful. This could be a potential negative factor. Alright, let's take a look at this while we're at it. Actually, the previous value was 58.2, and this time the expectation is 58.0. So what was the actual number? Okay, well, never mind. Let's take a look at short-term inflation and long-term inflation, actually compared to before. There isn't much difference between the previous value and the forecast. Both are about 4.8. This is for the short term, 1 year. So looking at the next year. American consumers don't have much confidence in future prices. They think prices will keep rising. In economics, prices are known for their stickiness. If you say today you want to buy a bento, is it still that so-called $20 some officials used to mention? Or 30? Now, if I go to a row of shops, you can't even get one for 60 or 70. Maybe in the south or central southern regions you can, or maybe in Taipei, it's really hard. Even 100 is the norm now. Prices are all in the triple digits, right? A chicken leg bento can go from 100 to 120, even 150. So this price rigidity? It actually makes American consumers a bit nervous too. So for the coming year, it's 4.8. Our CPI is, how much was it? Just over 3 yesterday, right? Their expectations are really high. Of course, it also has to do with Trump's tariffs or maybe future prices, right? And then there are factors like material shortages and all sorts of things. They don't feel that optimistic. Well, in the long run, it won't be that high. For the 5 to 10-year outlook, it's about the same. So, this 3-point figure is more in line with the CPI numbers. That is to say, really, over 10 years, it might go up 3% each year, like that. Actually, they think that's reasonable, and it's also what they expect. Alright, now let's take another look at the US stock earnings reports. Actually, just last night, or rather, in the early hours after the market closed today, there was an announcement. Adobe's ADB revenue, in fact, exceeded expectations, coming in at $6.08 to $6.13 billion. The adjusted figures here are also slightly higher, and they even emphasize that they are the leader in the AI creative field. Of course, it's natural for a company to hype itself up, or to praise their own business. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. So just before the market opened, I saw it was left with about 3.8%. Of course, you can't compare that to, what was it? Oracle. But at the very least, for shareholders who hold this stock, it's actually not bad. Congratulations. Really, congratulations. At least there's finally some good news coming out. Alright, let's take a look. Today, in the pre-market gainers and losers, we're already on the last page, and there are quite a few stocks with factuality in there. Financial tech, fintech. Lately, what's been really hot are exchanges like Coinbase, those crypto trading platforms. Or actually, they're all related, like crypto lending platforms. The ones we just mentioned are also all related fintech companies. Alright, we see robotics showing up, and Supermicro Semiconductor is back again. It's up 5.5%. Yesterday, Chrono was down, but now it's up in pre-market trading. Among gainers, Adobe is here too, but it only went up a little over 3%, about 3.8%, so it didn't make the top 15. Now, let's look at the decliners. Biotech stocks are still generally seeing declines. One of the bigger ones is Red Cat, a drone company. But because it surged too much yesterday, it went up 20% yesterday. So, when we talked about the drone sector earlier, we mentioned this company. But since it went up so much, it's just going through a correction now, which is normal. Alright, so those are the 3 main ones I just looked at. In pre-market trading, the Dow Jones is actually a bit weak, down about 0.2%. As for the Nasdaq, it's basically flat, up around 0.05%. A bit later, we'll be looking at things like the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index. And then, after the spot market opens, we'll also be watching the buzz around the cryptocurrency exchange platform Gemini. What exactly is going on? We'll keep an eye on it, so stay tuned for our cybersecurity update next week. We brought you this information on Cybersecurity Weekly. See you.
Our company has no improper financial interests in the individual securities recommended or analyzed. The information in this program is for reference only. Investors should make independent judgments, evaluate carefully, and bear their own investment risks. If you don't want to miss the latest market updates, be sure to turn on the notification bell and hit subscribe. In addition, we have plenty of great video content on both Facebook and YouTube. Don't miss out. In our group, we share in-depth explanations of global financial events with you every day.